If you only had 1 minute left to live, what would you do? It's a question that rattles the soul, isn't it? We all think we know the answer, but when it's truly put to the test, would we be ready? Would we even know what to do with that last minute? Or, would we freeze, paralyzed by the reality that our time has run out? I never thought much about it before, to be honest. Death was always something distant, something I believed was for other people, not for me, not yet. I used to think the end was just that, an end. A final curtain dropping on the stage, with no encore. No second chances. Just darkness. And yet, when the time came for me, I found myself in a place where I could no longer deny the truth of what was about to happen. I was standing on the edge of death, watching it unfold before me, in a way that I could never have imagined. I never believed there was anything after death. No spiritual realm, no light at the end of the tunnel. I thought that once we die, that's it. Your body rots, and the world moves on without you. A simple, finite cycle. But here I am, Thomas Walker, sitting at the edge of that very mystery, and I'm telling you, everything I thought I knew about life and death has been turned on its head. It all started like any other day. I was scheduled for surgery, a routine procedure. At least, that's what the doctors said. You're in good hands, they reassured me. But, as I lay there on that cold, sterile operating table, I felt a deep unease gnawing at me. Something wasn't right. It was a simple procedure. Or so they told me. An outpatient surgery for a routine issue that I had been putting off for far too long. But as the anesthesia began to seep into my veins, something inside me flickered, a final, fleeting thought before everything went dark. I thought, what if something goes wrong? And then, I was out. When I awoke, I wasn't where I expected to be. I wasn't in a recovery room, groggy from the anesthesia. No, I wasn't even in my body anymore. I could feel it, feel myself drifting, pulling away from the physical world. My first sensation was the distinct weightlessness, like floating, but not in water. Just floating. It was as if my body, the body I had lived in for 65 years, no longer existed. I wasn't a prisoner of flesh and bone. I was something else. The next thing I knew, I was looking down at myself. There, on the operating table, was my physical form, still and unmoving, a lifeless shell. I could see the doctors and nurses moving around it, their voices muffled, but the details didn't matter. What mattered was that I wasn't part of it anymore. I wasn't tethered to the body they were working on. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. A vivid dream, perhaps, a hallucination brought on by the anesthesia. But the more I observed, the more real it felt. More than real. This wasn't just a dream. This was something far more profound. I felt drawn upward, like a string pulling me toward the ceiling. As I floated higher, I could hear the faint hum of the hospital machinery, but it seemed so distant, as if I was no longer of this world. My perspective shifted, and soon, I was rising toward a blinding light, bright, welcoming, and vast. I couldn't see where it ended. It wasn't the light from the fluorescent bulbs overhead. No, this light felt different. It felt like warmth, like peace. Like I had finally found something I had been searching for my whole life. I could feel it pulling me toward it, urging me to go further, to leave everything behind. In those first few moments, I was free. Free from pain, free from fear, free from everything that had bound me in this physical form for so many decades. There was no more anxiety about money, health, or time running out. There was no fear of what would happen after my body stopped breathing. In that moment, I felt completely at peace. And then, just as suddenly as I had risen, I heard a voice not from my ears, but from somewhere deep within me. It wasn't loud or booming. It wasn't even a voice I could describe as male or female. It was more like a feeling, a thought that entered my mind without warning. You can stay, or you can go back. The words echoed inside my mind, and for a moment, I was paralyzed by the sheer weight of them. Go back. Back to what? To the life I had known. To the world of illness, aging, and constant worry. Or was I supposed to stay here, in this peaceful place, where time didn't matter, and the burdens of the world were far behind me? It wasn't just a choice between life and death. It was a choice between two entirely different realities. And in that moment, I realized I had no idea what I truly wanted. The life I had lived was filled with ups and downs, joys and sorrows, but it was my life. The thought of leaving it behind, even for the peace I was feeling now, was unsettling. But then, the reality of my body, lying there on the table, struck me. I wasn't really dead yet. Not fully. This was just a glimpse, a brief moment of transition. I could still choose. I could still decide. I didn't know it then, but I was about to make the choice that would change everything. I don't know how long I hovered there, between worlds, suspended in that moment of perfect peace. But as I drifted closer to the light, I felt a pull, a tug back to my physical form. Something was calling me. A responsibility. A duty. Perhaps it was my family. My wife, my children. Perhaps it was my unfinished business here on earth. Whatever it was strong enough to make me hesitate. In the end, I chose to return. Not because I was ready, but because I didn't feel finished. There was still something left for me to do. And that's when everything shifted again. I felt myself being drawn back into my body. At first, it was just a sensation of pressure, as if I were being squeezed into a tight space. And then, pain. A sharp, searing pain as I was thrust back into my physical form. It was like being shoved into a coat that didn't quite fit. When I opened my eyes, I was back. But I wasn't the same. My heart was beating again, my lungs were drawing in air, and I could feel the cold metal of the operating table beneath me. But the world around me didn't feel the same. The colors were different, the sound strange, and the weight of it all, overwhelming. I tried to speak, to call out, but I could only manage a rasping breath. The doctors and nurses were still around me, but they didn't seem to notice anything was wrong. No one saw the transformation I had just undergone. They didn't understand. And neither did I. All I knew was that something had changed. Something inside me had shifted. And no matter how much I wanted to explain it, no one would ever truly understand what I had experienced. But I knew, deep down, that I had crossed a line. A line between life and death. And now, I had to figure out what that meant for the rest of my life. Was I the same Thomas Walker who had gone into surgery? Or was I someone else entirely? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? I didn't feel the moment my heart stopped. There wasn't a jolt, no dramatic gasp, no final thought echoing in my mind. 1 second, I was in the operating room, tethered to the soft hum of machines and the scent of antiseptic. The next, I was nowhere. And then I was somewhere. I remember the quiet first. A silence so pure, so total, that it felt like time itself had paused. Not the kind of silence that presses in on you in an empty room, but a comforting quiet, like the world had taken a deep breath and finally exhaled. For a while, I didn't question it. I just was. No pain. No fear. Just being. Then I noticed I was looking at something. A ceiling. My first thought was that I was waking up in the recovery room. But it wasn't the recovery room ceiling I was looking at. It was the ceiling of the operating theater, from above. Below me, I saw a man lying on a metal table. His skin was pale. Eyes closed. Motionless. Doctors hovered over him with frantic energy, their voices too muffled to understand, like I was underwater. One nurse was pressing down hard on the man's chest, while another barked something toward the hallway. It took me a moment to understand what I was seeing. The man lying there was me. My hair. My hands. The little scar above my left eyebrow that I'd had since high school. I knew that body better than anyone. But I wasn't in it. I was watching it. Detached. Calm. Almost like watching someone else on a TV screen. I should have panicked. I should have screamed. But there was no fear. No shock. Just an odd sense of acceptance. So this is it, I thought. I'm dead. But even that realization didn't stir much in me. In fact, I felt a strange sort of lightness. Like I'd been carrying something heavy my entire life and hadn't even known it, until it was suddenly lifted. I hovered there for what felt like moments, or maybe hours. Time didn't work the way it used to. I wasn't counting seconds or heartbeats anymore. There was no heartbeat. I was simply floating above a body that no longer held me. Then the light came. It didn't burst in like sunlight through a window or blind me like a searchlight. It simply appeared. Soft and glowing at first, like a shimmer in the corner of my vision. It grew steadily, warming the space around it, illuminating things that didn't quite have shape or edges. It wasn't coming from a lamp or bulb. It came from everywhere and nowhere. And with it came the feeling. Peace. That's the best word I have for it, but even that falls short. It wasn't just peace, it was home. It was as though every warm hug I'd ever felt, every lullaby my mother sang, every moment I'd ever felt safe and loved, was being poured over me all at once. My body, whatever form I now had, was bathed in comfort. There was no sense of weight, no pressure, no urgency. Just serenity. I moved toward it without thinking. Not walking, not floating, not flying, just drifting. The closer I came, the more I felt connected to something bigger than myself. Not in the religious sense, exactly. I'd never been a particularly spiritual man. I went to church on holidays, mostly for the sake of my wife. But this wasn't about religion. It was about presence. I felt known. Fully. Completely. Without judgment or shame. The light didn't speak, not in words. But I heard something, or rather, I understood something. Not with my ears, but directly in my being. A message, clear and gentle. You are safe. Tears welled in me, not physical tears, since I had no physical body, but an emotional release that had been waiting for decades. All the fear, the doubt, the anger I'd carried through life, gone. Melted in that light. And then, something remarkable happened. I began to see shapes in the light. Forms. Figures. I can't say I recognized them the way we recognize people on the street, but I knew them. A presence stepped forward, tall, gentle, familiar. There were no facial features. No arms reaching out. But I felt the love. An overwhelming, unconditional love that made every earthly love I'd ever known seem pale in comparison. I don't know how I knew, but I did. It was my father. He died when I was 26. We had barely spoken during his final years, too many stubborn words, too many silences. Yet here he was, without resentment, without regret. Just love. I could feel his thoughts, though no words passed between us. He was proud of me. He forgave me. And most shocking of all, he understood me. In a way no one ever had. Others came too. Shapes from my past. A teacher from childhood who'd believed in me. A friend who died in Vietnam. Even my old dog, Max. It sounds crazy to say it, but Max was there too. Or something of him was. That same unspoken loyalty and joy I remembered from when I was 10. I felt surrounded by a tapestry of connection, of every soul I had touched, and who had touched me in return. And then, like a quiet bell ringing in a distant valley, I felt a shift. The light pulsed. Not with urgency, but with decision. And again, that inner voice, so calm and neutral, returned. You may stay, or return. The choice is yours. Stay. In this place of peace and belonging. Where nothing hurt, nothing worried, nothing waited. Or return. To the cold, broken body on the table. To aging. To loss. To uncertainty. My mind swirled. Who would choose to go back? But the question wasn't about what I wanted. It was about what I still needed to do. And that's when I saw them. My wife. Sitting in the hospital lobby, clutching a styrofoam cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. Her eyes were red. Her mouth was moving, whispering prayers to a God she wasn't sure was listening. My daughter. On a plane, rushing to reach me before it was too late. My grandson. Too young to understand what it means to lose someone. Too young to have made a real memory of me yet. A ripple passed through me. There were still chapters in my story unwritten. Still lessons to teach. Still words to say. Apologies to give. Hugs to hold. Laughter to share. And though I had no mouth, no breath, I made my choice with a simple thought. I'm not done. The moment I decided, the light shimmered with warmth, not disappointment. I was honored for choosing, not punished. I was loved, either way. But now, I would return. Return to pain. Return to struggle. Return to life. And with that, I fell. Or rather, descended. Spiraling, not fast, not slow, but steady, like being pulled gently back through water. Back toward the cold, sterile lights of the operating room. Back toward Thomas Walker. Back into the body I had just left behind. I've tried to explain it to people. Tried to put into words what it felt like beyond that light, in that place where I wasn't dead, but I wasn't alive either. But words are slippery things. They shrink the moment you try to hold them up to something that big, that infinite. Still, I'll try. Because if you're listening, maybe you're curious. Maybe, like I once was, you're afraid of the unknown. Maybe you've lost someone, and you lie awake at night wondering where they are now. Or maybe you've stared into the dark yourself and want to know if there's something, anything, on the other side. Well, there is. After I made the decision to return, to come back to life, I wasn't thrown back into my body like some movie where the hero suddenly gasps awake. No, before that, I lingered. I was shown something. Something more. The light that had embraced me began to shift. It didn't dim. It expanded. Like it had been holding back, and now that I had chosen to return, it was showing me just a little more. Not everything. But enough. I was moving again, not drifting aimlessly like before, but being guided. There was an intelligence there, something deeply wise and compassionate, leading me gently but purposefully. I saw colors. I know that sounds underwhelming, but these weren't colors like we see on Earth. Not red or blue or green. These were living colors. They shimmered and moved like they were breathing, and they carried feelings, joy, love, nostalgia. Each color had a sound, and each sound brought with it a memory, a meaning. It was as if every emotion I'd ever felt had been turned into light and sound, and I was walking through it like a gallery of my own soul. And then came the images. Not like watching TV. More like remembering, but in a way that was vivid and total. I wasn't just seeing memories, I was reliving them. I watched myself as a boy, sitting in my father's lap while he read me Treasure Island. I felt the warmth of that moment, the scratch of his beard on my cheek, the steady rhythm of his voice. I hadn't thought about that memory in decades, but there it was, as fresh as yesterday. Then I saw the day my daughter was born. I saw the tears in my wife's eyes, the trembling in my hands as I held that tiny, wriggling miracle. I felt the love again, raw and overwhelming. And then I saw the moments I wasn't proud of, the fights, the things I said in anger, the people I hurt without even realizing it. But here's the thing, there was no judgment. I wasn't being punished or condemned. I was simply shown. Like someone was saying, this is what your life has meant. This is the ripple you've made. And somehow, I understood that this experience wasn't unique to me. Everyone, eventually, would have this kind of review. Not from some angry judge in the sky, but from a place of truth. From love. There was a point when the light and the sound and the memories all blurred together into something I can only describe as oneness. I felt like I wasn't just Thomas Walker anymore. I was still me, yes, but I was also more. Connected to everything. Everyone. Every soul I had ever touched, and even those I hadn't. The barrier between me and them faded. It was like remembering something I'd always known deep down, we're all part of the same great whole. In that moment, I understood things I could never explain now. It was like my soul had access to a knowledge that the human mind can't contain. I understood how everything was connected, how the smallest kindness could ripple across lifetimes. I saw how pain created empathy, how even the darkest moments could be seeds for healing. And then I heard it. A sound. But not a sound. It was music, but not made by instruments. It felt like the universe breathing. A harmony that stretched beyond time, resonating in a way that made every cell in my being vibrate with joy. It was familiar, like a lullaby I'd forgotten I knew. It told me I was loved. That I had always been loved. That I always would be. I was surrounded by that feeling, of being cherished, understood, seen. Not just for my successes or the image I presented to the world, but for who I really was. Every flaw. Every doubt. Every fear. And it was enough. I remember thinking, why would anyone want to leave this? But then I saw my family again. Not just as memories, real, living images. My wife, sitting by my hospital bed, holding my hand. My grandson, riding his bike for the first time. My daughter, laughing with tears in her eyes. They were pulling at me, not in a desperate way, but like a gentle invitation. That's when the light gave me a choice again. You can stay, the voice said, not in words, but in truth. Or you can go back. And even though every fiber of me wanted to stay, I knew what I had to do. I had more to say. More love to give. I had to tell people what I had seen, what I had felt. I couldn't carry this alone. Someone needed to know. You needed to know. So I said yes. Yes to pain. Yes to sorrow. Yes to life. And in that moment, I felt the most painful thing I'd felt since the beginning of all this. Separation. Like being torn from a perfect embrace. Like leaving home knowing you won't feel that safe again for a long time. But there was no regret. Only love. And then, like a slow-motion fall through clouds, I began descending. The colors faded. The music dimmed. The light grew distant. And I was back in my body. I came back slowly, like resurfacing after diving too deep, your ears ringing, your lungs burning, your mind not yet sure which way is up. First came the weight. An unbearable heaviness, as if I'd been crammed into a suit 2 sizes too small. My limbs didn't feel like mine. I was suddenly aware of the gravity I hadn't missed in the light-filled place I'd left behind. It dragged at me. Pulled me down. My chest ached. My throat was raw. Then came the noise. Voices, sharp and urgent. Beeping machines. Shuffling feet. The sound of gloves snapping. I heard my name, Mr. Walker, again and again, spoken by people I couldn't see, couldn't respond to. I couldn't open my eyes. Not yet. My mind was back, but my body lagged behind, like it hadn't gotten the message I was alive again. My breath came shallow, each inhale a conscious decision. And with each one, a dull pain returned. My ribs. My chest. My head. Everything hurt. But even through the pain, I knew, I was back. It wasn't peace anymore, it was pressure. A hospital room. Harsh light overhead. I could feel the needles in my arms, hear the dull hum of the oxygen machine beside my head. And the grief. I didn't realize it right away, but there was grief in that return. A deep, aching sorrow, not because I was alive, but because I wasn't there anymore. I had been somewhere beautiful. Somewhere that made everything here, this broken, chaotic, wonderful world, feel like a dim reflection. I was home, but not the real home. When I finally opened my eyes, I saw two nurses. One noticed and leaned over, calling to someone in the hallway. The other looked stunned, like she'd just seen a ghost. And maybe she had. A doctor came in. Then another. They spoke to me, their words jumbled and distant at first. I tried to answer, but my mouth was dry, my voice too weak. It took effort just to blink. They were saying I'd gone into cardiac arrest on the table. That they'd lost my pulse. That it had been over 5 minutes. 5 minutes. But what I had experienced felt like hours. Maybe days. Time didn't exist there the way it does here. One of the nurses touched my hand gently. "You're lucky," she said. "We thought we lost you." I didn't have the strength to respond, but I wanted to say, "You did." They hadn't brought back the same man. The days that followed were surreal. My body slowly recovered, but my mind, my soul, they were somewhere else. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, expecting to see the light, to hear the music. But it was always the cold blue walls of the hospital. Always the machines. The wires. The dull ache of earthbound existence. No one asked if I saw anything. No one seemed to think that I might have experienced something on the other side of that flat line. Maybe they were afraid to ask. Maybe they assumed I'd say no. But I had seen everything. And I couldn't pretend I hadn't. When my family came to visit, I smiled, hugged them, said the right words. My wife held my hand and cried. My daughter whispered, "We almost lost you, Dad." My grandson climbed into my bed, completely unaware of how close I had come to being a memory instead of a man. I wanted to tell them. Every cell in my body screamed to tell them. But the words died in my throat. What could I say? I floated above my body. I saw the light. I spoke to my father. I chose to come back. No one wants to believe something so wild. So impossible. I tried once. A few days after I got home, I told my wife, Ellen, as we sat on the couch. I told her everything. How I'd watched the surgery from above, how I'd seen colors that don't exist, heard music that doesn't come from any instrument. I told her about the voice, the presence, the love. I told her about the choice. She listened quietly, holding my hand the whole time. And when I finished, she said, "You had a dream, Tom. That's all. A hallucination from the medication." I didn't argue. I just nodded. Because I knew no amount of explaining would make her see what I had seen. She wasn't being cruel. She was scared. She had nearly lost me, and the thought of me being somewhere else while she was begging God to keep me alive, it was too much. Too painful. I didn't bring it up again. But I couldn't let it go. Something in me had shifted, fundamentally. I saw it in the little things. The way sunlight fell through the trees. The way my grandson laughed. The way I felt walking past a stranger and sensing, really sensing, that they, too, were a soul on a journey. I'd been changed. It wasn't just about belief anymore. It was about knowing. I didn't need proof of an afterlife. I was the proof. I found myself craving silence. Long walks. Time alone. I began journaling, trying to capture the experience, though words failed me again and again. I read books on near-death experiences. Some sounded like mine. Some didn't. But there was one thing we all shared, a truth that went deeper than language. I knew things now. Things I couldn't unknow. That we are not just our bodies. That we are loved more than we can imagine. That death is not the end, not even close. But here's the hardest part. Coming back doesn't mean returning to who you were. It means becoming someone new. And that's terrifying, not just for you, but for everyone around you. People look at me and still see Thomas Walker. Husband. Father. Retired engineer. 65 years old. But inside, I'm not the same. I can't laugh at small talk anymore. I can't get worked up about politics, or bills, or whether it's going to rain tomorrow. It all feels like static. Noise. What matters now is different. Deeper. Slower. Softer. I look at people, and I don't see faces, I see stories. I see souls. I wonder if they've been to the light. If they've forgotten, like I almost did. Or if maybe, just maybe, they're waiting for someone to remind them. I don't talk about it much. But sometimes, in the quiet, I whisper to the light. I remember. And in that moment, I feel it again. I'm not alone. I never was. They tell you to be grateful after something like this. You're lucky to be alive, they say. You got a second chance. And I get it, I really do. I nod, I thank them, I say all the things you're supposed to say when you've dodged death. But the truth is, I didn't feel lucky. I felt lost. Everything looked the same, my house, my street, my favorite recliner that still creaked the same way when I sat in it. The world had moved on, unchanged. But I hadn't come back as the man who left for surgery that day. That man, the old Thomas Walker, he died on that table. What returned was someone else entirely. In the weeks after I got home, I walked through life like a ghost. I was there, but not in it. I'd watch TV with Ellen and not remember a single scene. I'd stir my coffee and forget if I'd added sugar. Sounds felt too sharp. Colors too dull. People too fast. The world buzzed with noise I didn't want to be part of. I craved silence. Real silence. The kind I felt in that place beyond the light. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of peace. But here, peace is hard to find. Everywhere I turned, life pressed in with its frantic pace, news headlines, errands, phone calls, social obligations. People rushing around, worried about things that now seemed impossibly small to me, the market going up or down, the neighbor's barking dog, whether the roast was overcooked. Meanwhile, I had touched eternity. I had been somewhere else. And no one around me could see it in my eyes. No one could understand why I now paused mid-conversation to stare at a leaf glinting in the afternoon sun, or why I sometimes cried quietly at the sound of a bird calling in the trees. I wasn't depressed. I wasn't losing it. I just didn't belong here in quite the same way anymore. I tried to return to my old routines. I went back to my weekly poker nights with the guys, retired engineers and accountants I'd known for years. But something had shifted. They were the same, talking sports, teasing each other, sipping cheap beer from plastic cups. But I couldn't connect. The stories felt hollow. I laughed when I was supposed to, but the sound felt foreign in my throat. One of them, Rick, slapped me on the back and said, "Glad you made it back, Tommy. Don't go floating off on us again, huh?" He meant it as a joke. But I flinched. Because that's exactly what I had done. I had floated off. And a piece of me still hadn't quite come back. When I tried to open up to mention that something had happened during surgery, they'd just shake their heads. Dreams, buddy. That's the drugs talkin'. It was easier to say nothing. So I started writing. Every night, after Ellen went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with an old leather notebook. I wrote what I saw, what I felt, what I knew. The colors. The presence. The music. I wrote until my hand cramped. I filled pages and pages, pouring it out, trying to keep it from fading. Because that was my biggest fear, that I'd forget. That the clarity, the peace, the truth of it all would fade like a dream, swallowed up by the humdrum of everyday life. I clung to it like a lifeline. I needed to remember. One morning, a few weeks after I returned home, I was walking through the park near our house. It was quiet, early enough that the kids weren't out yet, and the joggers had already gone. I sat on a bench near the edge of the pond, watching the light shimmer on the water. And out of nowhere, I felt it again. That presence. It wasn't a vision. No voices. Just a deep, unmistakable warmth, like the light I had felt beyond death was brushing against me, saying, "I'm still here." I sat still for what felt like an hour, just breathing, eyes closed, letting it surround me. And in that moment, I realized something important. I hadn't come back empty. The light hadn't stayed behind. A part of it came with me. I had brought it back, in my heart, in my soul. And maybe that was the point. Maybe I was meant to carry that peace into this world, not hoard it for myself. Maybe I wasn't supposed to go back to normal. Maybe I was supposed to be changed. The problem is, the world doesn't like change. Ellen grew quiet around me. I could see it in her eyes, the worry. She didn't understand why I was different. Why I seemed distant one moment and hyper-aware the next. I tried to explain, carefully this time. "I think I died," I said one evening, gently. "I left, and came back." She looked at me, lips parted, eyes wide. "You mean you had a near-death experience?" she asked, her voice almost whispering. I nodded. She sat with that for a long time. Then she said, "Do you think it was real?" I paused. "It was more real than this," I said, gesturing to the kitchen, the plates, the ticking clock. "More real than anything I've ever known." She didn't reply. Just reached across the table and took my hand. We sat in silence for a long time, her thumb rubbing slow circles across my skin. That was the closest we came to talking about it again. But I think, deep down, she believed me. Or maybe she wanted to. The hardest part about coming back from death isn't the pain. It isn't the confusion or even the loneliness. It's the knowing. The knowing that everything you thought was solid is really just shadow. The knowing that we are more than bodies. That there is something, someone, waiting on the other side. And the knowing that the world you've returned to isn't ready to hear it. But still, you try. Because someone out there needs to know. That death is not the end. That the light is real. That love doesn't stop when a heartbeat does. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? You don't come back from something like that empty-handed. That's what I've come to believe. I didn't just see the light. I brought something back with me. Not in my pockets or on my skin, but inside. In the quiet places of my soul. A knowing. A kind of wisdom I hadn't earned the traditional way, not through study or decades of living, but from stepping briefly outside of time. People think near-death experiences are all about what you see, the tunnel, the light, the figures waiting at the end. And yes, I saw those things. But what mattered most was what I learned. Or maybe it's better to say, what I remembered. Because in that place, nothing felt new. It all felt familiar, like I'd always known it deep down but had forgotten somewhere along the way. Coming back wasn't about gaining something, it was about uncovering what had always been true. So here's what I want to share. Not what I believe, but what I know. First, we are not our bodies. I left mine behind. I watched it lying on that table. I saw the doctors working on me. I floated above them, fully conscious, fully myself. But without pain, without fear. I was me without the shell. And it was the most freeing thing I've ever felt. I know now, with certainty, that we are more than flesh and bone. We are soul. Eternal, enduring, luminous. Our bodies are like clothes, we wear them for a time, then leave them behind when they no longer serve us. That doesn't mean life here is unimportant. It just means it's not all there is. Second, we are loved beyond understanding. I didn't meet a man with a beard or see golden gates. But I was surrounded by a love so complete, so unconditional, that it broke something open in me. There was no judgment, no shame, no list of wrongs. Only understanding. Acceptance. It wasn't the kind of love you earn. It was the kind that just is. A love that sees you, all your mistakes, your regrets, your secrets, and says, you are still worthy. I've never felt anything like it here on earth. Not even from my parents, my wife, or my child. And that's not to say they didn't love me deeply. They did. But this love was different. Bigger. Endless. I think if people knew, really knew, how deeply they are loved, this world would be a very different place. Third, nothing is wasted. Not even pain. In that place beyond, I was shown moments from my life, good, bad, small, forgotten. And what struck me most wasn't how big or important they were, but how they mattered. Every act of kindness. Every word of anger. Every tear shed alone in the dark. They were all threads in a vast, interconnected tapestry. Even the pain had purpose. Especially the pain. I saw how my suffering, things I thought were pointless or unfair, had ripples. My father's anger. My own failures. The years I spent feeling small and unseen. I saw how those experiences shaped me. How they taught me empathy. How they softened my heart in ways success never could have. There were no wasted moments. Everything was a teacher. And I understood then, the worst things in my life didn't break me. They built me. Fourth, we are connected. All of us. This was one of the hardest things to explain when I came back, but one of the clearest truths I was shown. We're not separate. Not really. We live in a world that teaches us to compete, to compare, to isolate. But in that space beyond death, I could feel the web of connection between every soul. Like strands of light linking us across space and time. What we do to others, we do to ourselves. Not metaphorically, literally. When we act in love, we strengthen the whole. When we act in fear or hate, we tear at the fabric of something sacred. No act of kindness is ever small. No cruelty goes unnoticed, not because we're being punished, but because we are each other. Fifth, death is not the end. It's not even the middle. This life. It's like a chapter in a very long book. And death is just the turning of a page. There's no fire, no eternal punishment. I didn't see judgment thrones or gates that opened or closed. I saw love. I saw choice. I saw a soul continuing. Death is not the great divider we think it is. It's a return. A homecoming. And for those of us still here, grieving someone we've lost, I need you to hear this. They are not gone. Not really. They are changed, yes. Transformed. But not lost. Not unreachable. Sometimes, when I sit quietly, I feel my father beside me. I don't see him. But I feel his presence, steady and warm, like a hand on my shoulder. I've felt others too. Friends long gone. People I didn't even know I'd touched. Souls passing through this world, just like me. They're still here. Just beyond the veil. And one day, when our time comes, we'll see them again, not in memory, but in truth. So what now? What do I do with this gift? That question haunted me for months. I had been given a glimpse into something extraordinary. But how do you carry that into a world that's still arguing over traffic and grocery lists and Facebook posts? You live differently. That's the answer. You love more easily. You forgive faster. You stop pretending things matter when they don't. You listen closer. You look people in the eyes. You say what you need to say, while you still have the chance. You stop waiting. You live. And you remind people, gently, when they're ready, that there is something more. That they are not alone. That their life matters. That they are loved. That's why I'm telling this story. That's why I'm letting my voice go out into the world, even if it trembles. Because someone out there is afraid. Or grieving. Or wondering if this, all of this, is just meaningless dust. And I need you to hear me, whoever you are. It's not meaningless. You are not meaningless. There is something waiting on the other side of this life that is more beautiful than anything you can imagine. And it's not far. It's right there, just a breath, a heartbeat, a whisper away. You don't have to be afraid. I'm not. Not anymore. There's a loneliness that comes with dying and coming back. And it's not the kind you'd expect, not about the body, not about the pain. It's something deeper. A quiet distance between you and the rest of the world. A silence that opens up when you try to speak the truth of what happened, and no one wants to hear it. I learned quickly that people don't know what to do with a story like mine. You can tell them about the light. The peace. The presence. You can describe the love so big it nearly broke you. But the moment the words leave your mouth, you see it, the way their eyes shift, their body stiffens, their expression politely closes like a door. They smile. They nod. They say things like, "That must have been something. Probably just a dream." I read that happens when the brain loses oxygen. Some just get quiet. Others change the subject. Most don't ask a second time. It's not their fault, really. We live in a world built on certainties, on things you can see, measure, touch. And death? Death is the biggest unknown of all. Nobody wants to believe there's something after, unless they've tasted it. And if they haven't, your story becomes a threat to their comfort. I stopped bringing it up. The first few times I told people, friends, family, even my doctor, I could hear how strange it sounded, even as I spoke. I floated above the room. I saw my own body on the table. I felt God. It sounds unbelievable. I know that. But it happened. And it was real. More real than this cup of coffee in my hand. More real than the ground under my feet. Still, I learned to keep it to myself. And that silence, it started to ache. There were moments when I doubted my own memory. Nights when I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, and wonder, did I make it up? Did my brain just fire off a dream to comfort me while I was dying? But then I'd close my eyes. And I'd feel it again. The light. The warmth. The knowing. Not a memory. A presence. And I'd remember, no, it was real. I was there. You don't forget something like that. Not really. It lives in your bones. Still, it's hard being the only one who remembers. One afternoon, I went to the grocery store. It had been a rough morning. I tried to tell my daughter more about what I saw, but she shut it down, gently, but firmly. "Dad," she said, "you almost died. Your brain was under a lot of stress. That can cause hallucinations. It's not your fault. I nodded like I understood. Like I agreed. But inside, I felt like I was screaming. So I wandered the aisles of that grocery store just to get out of the house. Just to feel normal again. I picked up bananas I didn't need. Looked at soup I wouldn't eat. And then I saw her. An older woman, maybe late 70s, standing in front of the bread display, holding a loaf of rye and staring at it like it might speak to her. I don't know why, but something told me to say something. Anything. So I said, hard to pick, isn't it? She looked up at me. Her eyes were the color of lake water on a cloudy day. And then, out of nowhere, she said. My husband died last year. Just like that. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't asked. I'd barely spoken a sentence. But something in her cracked open. He just dropped one morning. Making coffee. Gone. She paused, eyes glistening. And I talked to him, you know. Every night. I don't care if people think I'm crazy. And before I could stop myself, I said, you're not crazy. He hears you. Her eyes locked on mine. Not startled. Not confused. Just, searching. And I added, I died, too. A few months ago. I came back. But I saw. I know he's still here. Just in a different way. She blinked fast. Then smiled. I knew it, she whispered. We didn't talk long after that. We both had shopping to do. But we didn't need more. In that brief exchange, something passed between us. Recognition. Truth. A kind of sacred permission. Not everyone wants to hear. But some people do. And those are the ones I speak for now. The silence has changed. It still exists. But it doesn't frighten me anymore. It used to feel like isolation. Now, it feels like waiting. Because I know the day will come, maybe for you, maybe for someone else, when that silence breaks. When something cracks open inside, and the question slips out. What happens when we die? And when that day comes, I'll be here. Not with answers, because I don't claim to have all of them. But with a story. A truth. A light I carried back from the edge. I'm not trying to convert anyone. I'm not asking anyone to believe what I saw. But I am asking you to wonder. To stay open. To listen when someone says they saw something on the other side. Because I did. And I came back not to prove it to you, but to remind you. We are more than flesh. We are deeply, impossibly loved. And we are never, ever alone. Not even when no one believes you. Especially then. After I came back, the world felt louder, but also, somehow, emptier. The silence I carried inside me wasn't just from being misunderstood. It was the echo of something, waiting. A message unfinished. A connection not yet closed. That's when the signs started. Small things, quiet things. Not the booming voice from heaven people expect. No angels appearing in my kitchen or trumpets in the sky. No, the messages from the other side don't shout. They whisper. It began with the clocks. The first one was the old mantel clock in the living room. A wedding gift, nearly 40 years ago. It hadn't worked in over a decade. The gears were gummed up, the hands frozen at 3:11. I'd meant to get it fixed, but never did. It was just a decoration by now. But one evening, a week after my near-death experience, I walked into the room and it was ticking. Not loudly, just a soft, rhythmic tick, tick, tick. And the hands? They were moving. I stared at it for a long time, heart thudding, unsure if I should trust my senses. I even called Ellen in. Tom, she said, squinting at the clock, it hasn't worked in years. We both stood there. No one had touched it. No new batteries. No repairs. And yet, for about 10 minutes, that clock came back to life. Then it stopped again. I checked it every day after that. Nothing. Silent, frozen at 3:22. As if whatever spirit had touched it had moved on. I started to notice other things after that. Songs on the radio, always the right one, at the right time. Not the big, obvious kind of signs, but personal ones. Specific. Like when I was feeling hopeless one morning, thinking I'd imagined the whole experience, and suddenly Johnny Cash's "I Walk the Line" played in a store aisle, a song my dad used to hum under his breath when he thought no one was listening. Or the feathers. I found them everywhere. In the car. On the porch. In the grocery bag once. Always small, white, and impossibly placed, like they drifted down from nowhere. At first I thought it was just birds. But it kept happening. On windless days. In closed rooms. I remember once, sitting outside alone, feeling lost, unsure why I'd been sent back. I whispered into the air, "Give me something. Anything." And moments later, a feather landed right on the notebook I was writing in. I smiled. Not because I could explain it, but because I couldn't. And somehow, that felt like proof. Some signs came as feelings. I'd be walking, and suddenly feel a warmth on my left side, as if someone was walking beside me. Not scary. Never cold. Just a presence. Gentle. Familiar. And sometimes, in my dreams, I'd hear voices. Not words exactly, but impressions. Thoughts that weren't mine. Keep going. You're not alone. Tell the story. They always came when I needed them most. One morning, I woke with a phrase in my mind so clearly I had to write it down before I even got out of bed: "You're still part of the light." I didn't know what it meant exactly, but I knew it wasn't mine. It came from that place. From them. The ones I left behind, or who had left me behind. One day, something happened that shook me more than all the rest. I was in the attic, going through old boxes. Ellen wanted me to finally throw out some of the junk we'd kept for years. School papers, rusted tools, cords to devices we no longer owned. Typical attic mess. At the bottom of one box was a yellowed envelope. My name was written on it, in my father's handwriting. I froze. I hadn't seen his handwriting in decades. Hands trembling, I opened it. Inside was a card he must have written before he died. Simple. A "thinking of you" card he never mailed. Inside, it said, "Tommy, you're stronger than you think. I'm proud of you, even when I don't say it." I sat there for a long time, holding that card, tears falling onto the cardboard floor. It wasn't a coincidence. I believe now that it was meant to be found, when I was ready. I think he knew I needed to hear those words again. Not from memory. But from him. We want messages from the other side to come with fanfare. We expect a glowing figure, a voice that splits the sky, something we can prove to others. But that's not how it works. At least, not for me. The other side doesn't care about showmanship. It cares about connection. And connection speaks quietly. It's the scent of your mother's perfume when no one else is around. The song your spouse used to love, playing at just the right moment. The dream that feels more like a visit. The warmth on your shoulder when you're grieving. The laugh of a child who looks at you like they know you from before. These are the sacred whispers. And if you're listening, if your heart is soft enough, you'll hear them. You'll feel them. You'll know. Not every sign is dramatic. But every sign is real. The other side isn't as far as we think. It's here. Overlapping with this world like layers of light. Always around us. Waiting to be noticed. So if you're reading this, or listening to me tell this story, and you felt something, a nudge, a presence, a sign that made your chest ache and your soul pause. Believe it. You're not imagining it. They're reaching out. Because love doesn't stop with death. And neither does the conversation. If you had asked me, before all this happened, whether I believed in God, I would have said something like, yeah, probably, and then changed the subject. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know. I grew up Methodist. Church on Sundays, potlucks, Easter lilies, that sort of thing. But faith was more of a habit than a conviction. I believed because everyone else around me did. Or because it was safer to believe than not. I said prayers, stood when I was supposed to, sang along with hymns. But deep down, I wasn't sure of anything. And if I'm being honest, I carried more doubt than belief most of my life. How could there be a God when so much of the world was full of pain? When good people got sick and children died and loneliness followed you even when you were surrounded by family? I asked those questions. Quietly. In the dark. When no one was listening. And when I nearly died on that operating table, I expected, if anything, to find out the truth. Either the lights would go out forever, or I'd meet the big man upstairs and get the answers. But what I got was something else. Something greater. Not certainty. Not rules or dogma. But presence. Love. Being. There was something there. Something conscious. Something divine. But it wasn't the God I was taught about in Sunday school. It wasn't male or female. It didn't speak in King James English. There was no throne or judgment, no ledger of sins and virtues. There was only truth. And truth didn't speak with words. It simply was. I didn't see God. But I knew God. The way you know warmth without seeing the sun. The way you recognize music in your chest, not just your ears. I was surrounded by something. Intelligent. Infinite. Compassionate beyond imagination. And that's when I understood, faith isn't about knowing. It's about remembering. Coming back into this world, I had to rebuild my faith from scratch. It wasn't the old version anymore, the one built on sermons and fear and expectations. It was something deeper, quieter. But doubt still crept in. That surprised me, honestly. I'd been to the other side. I knew what was waiting. But still, I'd wake some mornings and wonder, what if I imagined it all? What if it was just brain chemicals? There's this strange thing that happens when you return from a near-death experience. You hold two truths at once, the ordinary and the eternal. You still have to pay bills. You still get stuck in traffic. But inside, you've seen the stars from the other side. And those two realities don't always fit well together. There were nights I begged for another glimpse. Not a full return, just a whisper. A flash of light. A reminder. Anything. But silence would come instead. And I'd be left staring at the ceiling, hand on my chest, feeling the slow, steady thump of life. Doubt is a funny companion. It doesn't leave even when you've seen the proof. But maybe that's the point. Because if we had complete certainty, we wouldn't need trust. And trust, faith, is what bridges this world and the next. I began to see faith not as belief in something far away, but as a relationship with something very close. I stopped asking, is God real, and started asking, can I feel love in this moment? I stopped trying to figure out who's right, the Christians, the Buddhists, the atheists, and started asking, am I being kind right now? I stopped trying to define the divine and started trying to live it. Because the road between worlds isn't paved with theology. It's paved with presence. One day, I went for a walk at sunrise. I hadn't slept much. The night before, I'd felt overwhelmed again. Too many questions. Too much distance between what I'd seen and the life I was living now. I sat on a bench by the lake, the water still and silver. And I whispered, "Where are you?" Not demanding. Just, tired. And then, it came. Not a vision. Not a booming voice. Just a moment of stillness so complete, so full, that it brought tears to my eyes. The birds kept singing. The wind kept moving. But in me, everything stopped. And I knew. God is not gone. God is not hiding. God is in the pause between breaths. In the silence after a question. In the warmth of a hand on yours. In the child's laugh. In the grieving widow. In the ache and the wonder. Faith is not a ladder we climb. It's the ground beneath us, quiet, steady, always holding us, even when we forget it's there. So yes, I still doubt. But now, I welcome it. Because doubt is the space where we reach. Where we stretch. Where we choose to listen for something more. And in that reaching, we grow. I don't know everything. I don't pretend to. But I know this. I died. And I came back. And in that in-between space, I met something greater than words can hold. Call it God. Call it the light. Call it love. Whatever name you give it, it's real. And it's with us, every second, even in the silence. Especially in the silence. That road between worlds. It runs through your heart. When I was younger, I feared death the way most people do, quietly, like a shadow that followed me, just outside my vision. I didn't talk about it much, but it was always there. That nagging question. What happens when it ends? I remember being 8 years old, lying in bed, trying to picture what it would be like to stop existing. My heart would pound so hard I could feel it in my throat. I'd try to shake the thought away, push it down with cartoons or schoolwork. As I got older, I buried the fear under responsibility, work, marriage, bills. There was always something to distract me from it. But in the quiet hours, when the world slowed down, that old fear would rise again. It was the same fear I saw in my father's eyes before he passed. A man who'd faced life with stubborn pride, but who trembled at the edge of the unknown. I remember holding his hand as the monitors beeped behind him, and he whispered, "I don't know what's waiting for me." I had no answer then. I was still afraid, too. But now, I'm not afraid anymore. And that's the miracle. Not that I survived, not that I saw the light, but that something inside me changed so completely, I can stand at the edge of life and feel peace. Here's the truth, death is not the enemy. We treat it like a monster. Like some thief coming to steal from us. But death isn't a robber, it's a guide. A door, not a wall. I've been through that door. I felt what waits on the other side. And it wasn't darkness. It wasn't emptiness. It wasn't punishment. It was home. A home I'd forgotten, but recognized the moment I arrived. People ask me sometimes, were you scared when it happened? And the honest answer is, I was scared before. But once I crossed over, that fear vanished like smoke. There's no panic when you're outside the body. No pain. No confusion. Just a sense of release, like finally taking off a heavy coat you didn't know you were wearing. That's what death felt like to me, relief. Not in a morbid way. Not because I wanted to go. But because I finally understood, it's not the end. It's the beginning of remembering. The strangest part is that coming back was harder than going. Returning to this body, to the aches and slowness, to the noise and doubt, it felt heavier than death ever did. I grieved, in a way. Not because I hated life, but because I'd seen something so beautiful, so completely whole, that this world felt dim in comparison. But I've come to understand that this life matters because it ends. Because it's temporary. And death? Death just hands us back to something bigger than ourselves. So when people ask me now, aren't you afraid to die? I look them in the eye and say, no. I'm afraid of not living while I'm still here. That's the gift the other side gave me. Not just peace about dying, but urgency about living. I don't waste as much time anymore. I don't hold grudges the way I used to. I don't put off forgiveness or love. I say what I mean. I hug longer. I cry easier. I laugh more freely. I tell people, I love you, even when they don't know how to say it back. Because I've learned, when death comes, it won't ask if you were successful. It won't ask how much money you made or what kind of car you drove. It will only ask, did you love well? Did you listen when your soul whispered? Did you show up for the moments that mattered? I want to answer yes to those. So no, I don't fear death anymore. I've befriended it. It walks beside me now, not as a shadow, but as a reminder. A sacred presence that says, today is precious. Use it well. And every time I see someone afraid, truly afraid, I want to reach across the table and hold their hand and say, it's okay. There's nothing to be afraid of. You won't be alone. You won't be lost. You won't disappear. You'll go home. And the people you've loved? The ones who've gone before you? They'll be there. Waiting. Smiling. Ready to walk with you the rest of the way. Sometimes I still get tears in my eyes when I think about it. Not from sadness. From gratitude. Because I know something most people only guess at. Because I've felt the truth. Because when my time really comes, and it will, one day, I won't fight it. I'll take a deep breath. I'll close my eyes. And I'll say, thank you. Thank you for the time I had. Thank you for the people I loved. Thank you for letting me go when it's time. That's not fear. That's peace. And I wish that peace for you, too. Not because I'm special. Not because I had some mystical encounter that makes me better than anyone else. But because what I saw, belongs to all of us. It's already yours. You just don't remember yet. But you will. We all will. And when you do, when you step through that door and feel that light wrap around you like the arms of someone who's loved you forever, you'll know. You'll remember. And you'll say what I said. I'm not afraid anymore. If you've followed me this far, then you've heard everything I remember, at least, everything I can put into words. But what I want to tell you now isn't just what I saw. It's what it means. Not just for me. For you. Because one day, maybe sooner than you expect, you're going to stand before the same door I did. That final moment. The crossing. And when that time comes, when your body lets go and your spirit rises, you won't be alone. You won't be afraid. You'll step through that last door like someone waking up from a long, complicated dream. And you'll remember, this isn't the end. This is home. In those few moments when I left my body, I saw more than just light. I felt truth. It didn't come as facts or images. It wasn't like reading a book or watching a movie. It was like absorbing truth straight into my being. There were no doubts in that place. No shame. No fear. Only understanding. I understood that nothing is wasted. Not a moment. Not a tear. Not a single breath. Even our mistakes, even our darkest moments, they become part of something greater, something that shapes us and softens us and brings us closer to love. I saw that we are never alone. That our loved ones who've passed, they're still with us. Not just in memory. In presence. Guiding. Whispering. Laughing with us when we laugh, crying with us when we grieve. I felt that God, whatever name you want to use, is not watching from a distance. God is in us. Around us. A part of the breath we take and the space between heartbeats. We're never truly separated from the source. We just forget. And when you die, the forgetting ends. You remember who you really are. You remember that you are not a body. Not a job. Not a past. Not a label. Not a failure. Not even a success. You are light. You are love. You are eternal. And none of the pain you went through was for nothing. None of the love you gave was lost. Nothing you feared had any real power at all. When I crossed over, there was a presence waiting for me. Not a man in robes. Not a judge. Just a knowing. A consciousness as vast as the sky but as personal as your mother's touch. And it knew me. All of me. And still, it loved me completely. Not in spite of who I was, but because of it. That's the real miracle. Not that there is life after death. But that love follows us through it. So what's on the other side of that last door? Here's what I know. There is no punishment. There is no hellfire. There is no eternal condemnation. What I felt was healing. Completion. Like every broken part of me had been carefully, gently sewn back together by something that had been waiting for me all along. And in that healing, I realized that we choose to come back. Not everyone does. Some souls stay. They're done with earth. Their lessons are complete. Their journey continues elsewhere. But some of us, we return. Not because we have to. But because we're called. Called to love someone. To forgive someone. To create something. To say something that someone needs to hear. I came back for this story. I came back for you. Now, I don't know what happens 100 years after you die. I don't know the full map of the universe. I'm still human. Still limited. But I do know that death is not to be feared. I know that we are so much more than we think. And I know that love, real, soul-deep, divine love, does not die. It expands. It welcomes. It builds bridges between this world and the next. And one day, you'll cross that bridge. You'll see familiar faces. You'll remember old dreams. You'll feel a joy so complete it will make every sorrow worth it. And you'll finally understand what I'm trying, with all my heart, to say. You are already home. You always were. So here we are, at the end of my story. But maybe it's the beginning of yours. Maybe something in these words stirred something in you. A memory. A longing. A hope. That's good. Hold on to it. Because you don't have to die to remember. You can start now. Look for the light. Listen for the whispers. Love without holding back. Forgive before you understand. Live like you've already been there. Because one day, you will be. And when your time comes, you won't run. You'll smile. You'll open the door. And you'll say, just like I did. I know this place. If there's one thing I've learned after everything I've been through, it's that the journey never truly ends. This story. It's not the last chapter of my life. It's simply a moment, a pause, an exhale before the next breath. I've crossed over, but I've also returned, because even after all that I've seen, there's so much more to discover. Not just on the other side, but right here, in the space we call now. Life doesn't stop when death comes knocking. Life continues. It evolves. And it asks us to live fully, every second, every heartbeat, every word. It asks us to love with abandon, to forgive what we thought we could never forgive, to experience joy as though it's the most precious gift we've been given. So many people live as though death is the end, as though it's the thing to fear, to avoid, to stave off for as long as possible. But the truth is, death is the most natural part of life. It is not the finality we make it out to be. It is simply another step. The real question, the one that has haunted me since I came back, is not, what happens after death? It's, what are we doing before death? What are we doing with the precious time we have? The chance to create, to connect, to make something beautiful in the world. Since I came back, I've found myself more open to life in a way I never thought possible. I've started writing again. I've hugged more often, and without hesitation. I've spoken truths I kept hidden for years. And in doing so, I've experienced a kind of freedom I never expected to find. There's a clarity that comes with knowing that the end of this life doesn't mean the end of everything. It means that we get to take all the love, all the lessons, and all the moments of joy and sorrow with us into whatever comes next. And we carry them forward in ways we can't even begin to imagine. That's the gift of near death, the ability to see the big picture. It gives us a glimpse of what lies beyond the horizon, but it also makes us realize how precious the view is right here, right now. I think back to that moment in the operating room, when everything slowed down and I thought I was slipping away. It seemed so final then. It felt like the end. But in reality, it was just another beginning. I wasn't just slipping away from life, I was waking up to something larger, something that transcends the small, individual moments that we often get lost in. I saw that there is no separation between life and death. It's all part of the same beautiful, interconnected web. And death? Death is simply another part of the cycle. Another step. This life, this experience of being human, is a journey we each take. The best we can do is make it meaningful. Not just for ourselves, but for those we love and those we'll never meet. Our every action ripples through time in ways we can't see or understand. Before I died, I was afraid to leave things undone. Afraid that I hadn't loved enough, that I hadn't been enough. But now, I understand that it's not about perfection. It's not about checking off every box or getting everything right. It's about showing up. It's about being present. It's about loving, even when it's hard. What matters is how we live, not in terms of the accomplishments, but in terms of how we make others feel, how we touch the hearts of those around us. I've learned that life isn't about avoiding mistakes, it's about embracing them, learning from them, and continuing to move forward. If you've ever wondered, like I did, whether you're doing enough with your time, let me tell you this, you are. If you love, if you try, if you keep your heart open, you are doing more than enough. There's a part of me that still feels connected to the world I saw on the other side. A part of me that knows, without a doubt, that everything I've experienced here has meaning. It's not just about the days we spend here on earth, the days we have before our bodies give out. It's about what we do with them, the way we love, the way we build, the way we connect to others. And maybe that's why I've started to see death not as something to fear, but as something to welcome. Because I know, in my heart, that it is not an end, but a transformation. A continuation of the journey. The only real end is the one we make for ourselves when we stop living fully. So, live fully. Be here, in this moment. Not just waiting for the next big thing, the next step, the next something. But be here in the now. Because it's in the now that we find meaning. It's in the now that we find connection. And it's in the now that we build the bridge to whatever lies on the other side. And that's the secret. The secret of life, death, and everything in between. It's not about the destination. It's about how we travel. We're all walking this path together, even if we can't see each other clearly. So, let's walk with purpose. Let's walk with love. Let's walk with the understanding that our souls are eternal, and every step we take counts. Because when the time comes, when the last door finally opens, you'll know that you lived well. That you loved deeply. And that you were never alone. And that's all any of us can really ask for. Now, as I sit here reflecting on the journey I've shared with you, I'm reminded of something simple yet profound: we're all in this together. Our stories, our lives, are all part of a larger story that stretches beyond what we can see, beyond what we can understand in this moment. But one day, we'll all see it for what it truly is, a tapestry of light, woven with love, and filled with endless possibilities. So here's my final message to you. Live your life with love. With gratitude. With joy. And when the time comes to cross that final threshold, you'll be ready. You'll know that the door isn't something to fear. It's just the next step on an infinite journey. And that journey? It never ends. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?